Hi, I'm Suvi Bergandino, and I am the marketing director for Nova and Nadia's Closet. And my responsibilities are being in charge of social media. I handle the Instagram, the Facebook, and I created the website for Nova and Nadia's Closet nonprofit, which is my baby. I love it. And I also manage the YouTube channel and just anything marketing, social media, web admin. I'm the one.
Hi, I'm Morgan. I'm a NICU nurse. I'm going to be the liaison between the nonprofit and the hospitals. I'm a certified breastfeeding counselor. I hope to help moms through their breastfeeding journeys. I also hope to support moms through their NICU stay because I was a preemie mom myself.
My name is Nina Garrison.
And how did you meet your husband?
We met back in high school when we were 16 and 17. With Shay, it was boring. Compared to everything that we went through, it was boring. We found out we were pregnant. It was our first baby, my first pregnancy in my whole life. And I had 2 ultrasounds the whole time. She was born 1 day early, July 5th, 2019. She came out in about 7 pushes, brought her home the next day. And she's been great ever since.
So what was it like finding out you were pregnant with twins?
Honestly, it was scary. I mean, my whole world flashed before my eyes in that ultrasound. I'm sure every person who has twins can agree with me. We tried for about 6 months to get pregnant with our second. After month, when it wouldn't happen, we both were like, okay, we'll try another 6 months and then we'll revisit what our plan is. I got pregnant and the lines have never been so clear in my life. And I called my doctor, and thankfully they gave me an early ultrasound when we went in, and everything changed from that second. The first 24 weeks, good. They were great. I, again, was shocked, but my body handled it okay. My levels were okay. I was in there regularly, but I was not high risk. Age, my last pregnancy, everything was fine. So every couple weeks I would go and everything was great. They would find the heartbeats, measure me, see you in 2 weeks. My 24-week appointment was my last one before everything, and they were like, we'll probably have to induce you at 36 weeks, they told me. The day I turned 25 weeks, I was at a play date with my girlfriend and my daughter. I got home, everything was fine. I just felt a little off. And that evening, my husband came home. We were discussing what we were having for dinner, and then everything started. Leading up, I would notice, like here and there, probably too much information, but I would feel like I would pee myself here and there. But I had a vaginal birth, so everybody wrote it off. So I brought it to my doctor's attention. They said it wasn't anything to worry about. Why should I? So that day, I was 25 weeks. It was a Saturday. It was right after Thanksgiving. We put our tree up the day before. Our house was decorated. I stood up and I was covered in blood all over. And I was only 25 weeks pregnant. So immediately I panicked. My husband called my sister and said, you need to come over right now. Something's happening. And I ran into the bathroom and I sat down and it was blood everywhere. It was everywhere. And I looked at my husband and I immediately said, I think we're losing them. And he held my hand and we both took a deep breath. My sister came over, we called 911. I called 911 and they're like, we're gonna take you to the closest hospital we can get you. I said, okay. I get in the ambulance. My daughter, Shay was only 2.5 at the time. Pure panic in her face. I'm trying to stay calm for her. I get in the ambulance and I try to keep it together because what else can you do, you know? And I get to Riddle and everybody knew I was coming because I had called my OB. And when I got there, the operating room was ready and they immediately thought they were delivering babies and I was losing them, which thank God I wasn't. So we get to Riddle and like I said, it's the Saturday after Thanksgiving. We get there and they tell me that they immediately put the ultrasound on my belly because they think that I'm losing both babies. And right away, both heartbeats are strong. They're calm. It's my body that's in distress. So they tell me that we're gonna do our best to calm everything down, and we want to get you to a higher level NICU. we don't want to deliver these babies here because then we're going to have to transfer them. And we don't want that. We want them in your belly. So of course I look at Joe again because what do you mean? I was on a play date this morning. Like now you're talking about delivering my babies. I just had a doctor's appointment on Monday and they were talking about delivering the end of February. It's November. Like, what do you mean? And finally, minutes go by and I'm laying there. I'm not allowed to move. They're pumped. They give me the steroids for their lungs in my butt cheek that I'll never forget. They hurt so bad, as you know. They're telling me all this information. I'm signing waivers. The operating room's ready. They're taking my jewelry off. They're doing as I lay there, and I don't even think I said anything. So our next goal was the next hour. Let's calm you down. Okay, we made that hour. Let's try another hour. And every hour that passed, the babies were calm. My body was slowly calming down. Once I was calm enough, they said, we're taking you to Lankenau. And I said, but my doctors are here. They said, Bryn Mawr. Lankenau has a great level NICU that we need you to be at. So I got in a Sprinter van. I swear it was a Sprinter van. Joe's with me. We hit every red light. And they get me to Lankenau, where, again, I'm entered into labor and delivery, expecting to deliver. And Ashley that day. Oh, Ashley. She was amazing. And I was told I wasn't allowed to move. And again, ultrasound. We go over everything. And I laid there all night and I just prayed. And I prayed so hard. I was like, just another day. And I made it to the next day and I was so excited. And then it was Sunday now and I remember saying to Joe, okay, we made it another day. We just needed to make another day. Now we can talk. We can see what the plan is. And my body was starting to calm down. I stopped bleeding. I think it was like 30 hours I was bleeding or something like that. It was so long. And I was exhausted, but I stopped bleeding. And I was able to sit up. I think I was able to even drink a Diet Coke. I think they gave me a Diet Coke. And I laid there and the boys were okay. And it was amazing. It was incredible. And I was considered stable. So in my mind, I'm stable, everything calmed down. I'm gonna get to go home and see my baby and go back to living life. It was a scare. And that wasn't it, unfortunately. And they moved me to a room on the antepartum floor. And everybody was so kind and they were so nice and welcoming. And I remember saying to the one nurse, I think it was Monday now, and I was like, oh, I can't wait till they just tell me when I'm going home. And she was like, honey, I don't think that's happening. I was like, okay, you know what I mean? And Joe went to work on Monday because Joe stayed with me on Monday because they wanted to have a sit down with us. So they sat down with us and they told us that through everything, I had a placenta abruption with Joey's sac, with his placenta and everything. And as it was calming down, they wanted to test me to see if I was leaking amniotic fluid, which I didn't think was a big deal, but I was. And they sat me down and they said, you're not allowed to leave. I said, I'm sorry, what? And they said, it's too much of a risk. You're gonna stay here until you deliver. And my whole life stopped. Because I'm a mom, I have a job, I have a husband, I have a house. I can't live here. It's Christmas. I can't live here. And they said, we're gonna shoot for the end of January. It's like November 30th. I said, I can't live here for 2 months. And all they kept telling me is, you're doing this to keep your boys safe and alive. And I said, then I'll do it. COVID was rampant during that month. I don't know if anybody remembers, but December 2021, COVID came back and reared its ugly head. So I was allowed one visitor a day. My daughter was not allowed to see me. It was awful. Finally, they told me I could see her every Saturday for 30 minutes in the lobby while I was wheeled down in a wheelchair, and I wasn't allowed to get up, but I was allowed to leave my room, thank God. And I saw her once a week for 30 minutes But it was such a breath of fresh air seeing her, and she was great because she was so little. If it was now, it would be different, but she handled it with such grace. And over that month, I did whatever I could to keep them safe. They told me I would deliver in 5 to 7 days, and I kept them in for 26. And I did everything that they told. I had a lot of scares, a lot of fusions and IVs and needles and poking and prodding, and I had no dignity left because everybody there saw every part of me. But I was doing it to keep them safe. And I did it for 26 days. Every single day that I was there, I would have 3 different hour-long monitoring. 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and 1 in the evening. I wasn't allowed to move during it. I was very big by then because living in the hospital with hospital food, I literally lived off pancakes. That's what I ate. Every day I lived off pancakes. And whenever somebody would bring me food. So they would monitor me, and I was getting so big that strapping the monitors around me became almost painful to me because Gage was up top. He was in my right rib. That's where he lived the whole time, and Joey was low. So they would have the monitors, and they would always find both heartbeats, and I would have the machine next to me. We would do our hour long. 98% of the time it was normal. There was once or twice where somebody would drop, and then I would have to stay on long. There were times where I was on 24 hours before because it was not a good reading. That was a terrible day. But the day that I delivered them, I moved out of my suite on the antepartum floor, and because they were shutting it down for the holidays, and they told me we're going to move you to labor and delivery because we're staying open, obviously, for the holidays. You can have the room right next to the OR. So we're talking about, what we're going to do for Christmas because I'm a lifer now. I'm here till the end of January. So that day, my sister had came and see me like she did whenever, she could get to me, and she bought me a huge cheesesteak from Las Patas because that's what I wanted, an extra large Dunkin' coffee, half decaf. And we sat and we talked for hours. It was a normal day. I was excited. I had a different view because my new room. And my husband was coming up almost every night to come visit me. Now, the week leading up to this, I had a couple big scares where we thought we were going to have to deliver. So my husband was all in standby. Everybody had Joe's cell phone number. They knew. Call him immediately because it was a good 20-minute drive. So Joe was on standby. That particular day, my sister spent the day with me. So Joe was like, well, I'll just come up later. I have to move all your stuff anyway out of your old room. So I'll wait. My dad was coming over to watch Shay on the monitor so Joe could come up. I'm like, take your time. There's nothing going on. My sister had left. I was relaxing, getting used to my new room. One of my favorite nurses happened to be on. And it was a normal day. It was so normal. It was my 9 o'clock. It was my 9 o'clock monitoring. They come in. I think I took a shower. And she came in. She got the monitors on. And she looks me dead in my eyes. And she said, I said, what? She was like, I have to hit the button. I'm like, what do you mean? And she said, there's going to be a lot of people in here. I think it's time. I was like, time for what? What do you mean? I could hear on the monitor, Joey's heart rate was thud, thud. It wasn't thud, 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 like it was all the times before. I swear to God, it was 10 minutes in between each heartbeat. Granted, it wasn't, but to me, in that pure panic, it was so slow. And she's almost on top of me. She's because I'm like, well, what do you mean? Because I think the button was up here or something. She said, there's going to be a lot of people in here. I need you to stay as calm as you've been this whole time. And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, I think they're coming. And I said, somebody needs to call Joe, and I'm screaming. I can't do this by myself. This whole time I've been dreaming about the day of having them, and now it's here and I'm by myself, and it's 9 o'clock and I'm alone. Joe's supposed to be here. I can't do this by myself. I said, you need to call Joe. She said, we're doing it. We're calling him. Every nurse that I knew, every doctor was in my room. Dr. Park at Lincoln Hall, who I love and will forever be someone who I will hold in my heart forever. She nicknamed the boys McSteamy and McDreamy from Grey's Anatomy because I started watching it during my stay because I had never watched Grey's. So she said, McSteamy and McDreamy will be here for Christmas. And I just remember her saying that, and she held my hand and she said, they're gonna be fine, you're gonna be okay. Because I was scared, I was so scared. And I just kept saying, call Joe, and there's people ripping my stuff. I have a gown on, I had my IV, everything's happening so fast. Literally, thank God I'm right next to the operating room. And they called Joe 8,000 times, he's on his way. And Joey's heart rate had dropped so low that it needed to happen, whether Joe was there or not. So I prayed to God and I just did everything they told me. We moved to the operating room. I was naked, basically, in front of all of these people. The room was full. The room was 172 degrees, I swear. And they kept telling me it was so hot in there because they were so early and it needed to be warm for them. And I was by myself, and and they were like my family at this point, so I didn't feel uncomfortable. But I was like naked, and I'm like scared to death, and Aaron just hugged me. And it was just in that moment, I was like, okay, we're doing this. They're coming. And I lay back, and they scream, Joe's here. And he's getting dressed in the hallway. And I instantly was like, okay, I can breathe. He's here. And Joe comes in, dressed in his full scrubs. He's like, oh my God, I blew every red light. He was like, I had my blinkers on. He was like, I made it. And I was like, oh my God, thank God. And I was so scared that I started getting sick because my anxiety was out of this world. And I kept yelling, am I gonna die? Like, I don't know why, but like, it was so overwhelming. It's so many people in there. My arms are strapped. They're doing everything, and I can't see the sheets up. I just feel pulling and prodding. I see the 2 incubators. Everybody's like coming over and saying, you're gonna be okay, you're gonna be okay. I'm like, I'm gonna be okay. They're gonna be okay. We're here, we made it. And that's all Joe kept saying is, we made it, we made it. And C-section goes. That was at 9 o'clock. They started my monitoring. Joey was born at 9:33, screaming his head off. He came out, Joe got to see him. I was literally still getting sick, but I remember Joe grabbed my face and he said, Joey's here. And I could hear him, and they whisked him away. And then at 9:36, Gage was born. And Gage screamed like a crazy person. And Joe just kept saying, they're here. You did it. And I was so relieved. But I also had no idea what I was in for. Because I thought the worst was over. And now I can start healing. And I can just be there for the babies and my family again, you know? And they were born and they whisked them away. I didn't even see them. Joe tried to get a picture, but it was so chaotic, and everything that happens after the C-section. They're trying to sew me up. I'm sick. Joe had to step out because he almost fainted because it was so hot. Me getting sick. The boys, my organs, like, you know. Joe stepped out and they wouldn't let him back in because they were like, she's very overwhelmed. We're just going to let her breathe for a second because I fainted afterwards. And it was just so much, you know. And I came to, and we were so excited, and they brought me back up to my room where the nurse was with me, and they did the after C-section care. And she kept saying to me, they should be calling any minute. We're going to wheel you down so you can see them and get a good look at them. I was like, okay. An hour went by, and I'm laying there because I'm still numb. I can't sit up. I can't do anything. Joe's like pacing, calling his family. They're here, texting everybody. The boys are here. It's almost Christmas, and it's on his mom's birthday. Like, of all days, you know, but they get to share a birthday with her, which we love. And the call just wasn't coming. And she was like, and the nurse, God love her, she was so not naive, but she was thinking what I was thinking. Why would anybody think anything different? And she said, I'm gonna call them. I'm gonna see what's going on. We gotta get you up there to see these boys. You deserve this. And we're like, oh, I wonder, like, Joe didn't even really get a glimpse of their hair. Are they gonna have red hair because our daughter's a redhead? And finally they say, okay, you can bring her up. And I'm so excited. And we get up there and I'm in a bed because I can't stand. Gage's incubator looked one way and Joey's looked another. When I lived at Lankenau, I went through the NICU. They gave me a tour, and I never remember seeing twins in separate incubators. And I didn't understand. And they told me that they kept talking about Gage. Oh, he's doing great. Look at him. He's beautiful. They were right next to each other. And I'm looking. Joey almost had, it almost looked, it was like blue on top of it. And they said, so Joey's good, but he's not great. I said, what do you mean? You told me if I did this, they would be okay. So, they want to get him stable. They want to get me stable. So, they bring me back up to my room. And they tell me to get some sleep. To get some rest. Don't worry. We're right downstairs. You gotta calm down. Your body needs to calm down. I was also literally in a bed, still numb. So they bring me upstairs. And me and Joe try to calm down and get some rest. We're talking, we're texting our friends. We're so excited. I almost put it in the back of my mind what they said. They were here. They're in a great NICU. They're gonna be fine. We get a knock on our door a couple of hours later. And they say that Joey isn't doing too well. And they'd like us to come down to the NICU. They couldn't figure out why he wasn't doing so well. He was on a regular, because Gage was on CPAP. Gage didn't even have to be amputated, or intubated. Yes, he didn't have to be because Gage was doing so well. From everything they pumped me with, his lungs were amazing. They couldn't understand why Joey wasn't taking the same strides as Gage was. So then he had to be intubated. So he was, and I get down there and he's intubated, which is the first time I've ever seen a child intubated. Like I said, Shay came home one day. She was born one day early. I don't know this world. Nobody knows this world unless you're in it. And there's no handbook. So we got there. Gage is doing wonderful. And Joey, there's what felt like 900 monitors around his incubator. He's intubated. Davita, the respiratory therapist, is very honest with me. She's like, he just needs a little extra help. That's what everybody would tell me. He just needs a little extra help. We're gonna get over this hump. Word got around to some of my nurses that were upstairs, and they came down and they saw the boys and they prayed with me and they hugged. He kept dropping. The thought of losing him never crossed my mind. Not once. I was like, it's not gonna, no. I cannot lose my son because I did everything they told me to do. I missed a month of my life to keep them safe. There's no way. This doesn't happen to people. You know what I mean? Like, why would this happen to us? I have 2 cribs at home. Their names are hung. I have a double stroller. I have 2 car seats waiting to take my kids home. This isn't gonna happen. They worked on him all day Christmas Eve. I stayed there all night. Me and Joe. We didn't leave. We didn't move. They did everything. After he was intubated, there was another level higher of support. One was actually called like a jet that they did on him. And it was so loud. I remember it was so loud, but he was coming back. His numbers were good. And then at one point, they actually had to do CPR on him in front of us. When I tell you, it was like a movie. like everything got quiet. And I just watched as my 3 family was getting CPR. And I'm like, how did this happen so fast? They did everything they could. Everything. The doctors were honest. The nurses were amazing. Everybody hugged us and loved us and surrounded us with so much love. It was Christmas Eve. They finally got him stable. And I think I went upstairs to either change or something, but Joe took me upstairs. And there was another doctor, I don't remember his name, but he had dark hair. And he came to our room and he sat at the end of my bed. And he said, we did everything we could. And I'm sorry. And I collapsed. Because this wasn't supposed to happen. He was supposed to be doing exactly how Gage was. Because I did everything that they told me. And because this doesn't happen to people. Who delivers 2 babies and only has 1? I was angry. It was Christmas Eve. I kept thinking about Shay. How am I supposed to have Christmas with my daughter, who I've been talking to about her 2 babies? And how am I supposed to face life without my son? The doctor told us that we could come down and say goodbye. It was Christmas Eve. Me and Joe went down. They took him off of everything. And it came to find out that early in my pregnancy, nobody caught it, but I was leaking amniotic fluid basically the whole pregnancy. That started in my teens. So even if I stayed in the hospital till my due date, Joey never would have lived. And no one knew. No one prepared me, and no one was prepared because nobody knew. They never tested me because I thought I was being myself. Like, I don't know any different. But in hindsight, I'm glad they didn't test me because I would have been hospitalized earlier than I was. Because of that break in his sac, Joey's lungs stopped developing. He developed as a baby. They were fraternal boys. He looked just like my husband, which was crazy. To be a 3-pound baby and look like my husband. But he never would have lived. I find peace because if this wasn't a twin pregnancy, I wouldn't have had Gage. If this was a single pregnancy, I could have left with no baby. I could have delivered that first day and had no babies. Joey needed to go to heaven so Gage could survive. I know it. It's awful. But Gage is doing so well because that month I lived in the hospital. I know it. And Joey got us there and saved Gage's life. Because if I would have delivered that first day at 25 weeks, I would have had no baby. I would have left with no baby. And almost 24 hours after birth, Joey went to heaven. I was holding him. Joe was right next to me. They took everything off of him so we got to see how beautiful he was. We had our moments. We had our time. The nurses were so amazing and they took pictures. They gave me his handprints. I have his feet. I have beautiful pictures of him in his hat and he's wrapped in a blanket. Me and Joe were able to hold him. But in order for us to process it, it was like, you can't dwell on this right now. You have a daughter at home and you have a son fighting for his life. I to this day, I do not know how I got up that next day and I survived, because it was awful. And to make that phone call to people and to look myself in the mirror and know the reality, and the purple butterfly on my door in labor and delivery, like everybody knew, you know? And it was almost like I was in an outer body. It was an outer body experience. It really was. And then to have to be strong and pick myself up, because what do? I can't lay in this. Yes, I can be sad, but I also can't forget that I have another son who I need to pull myself together for. And that's what we did. I knew nothing about the NICU. I never needed to know anything. I felt like you'd see it on TV or you'd hear Paz saying like a baby was in there for a couple days or breathing issues. I knew nothing about it. I was intimidated, but I was also like, okay, he is in great hands. But it was also very traumatizing, because now I'm going back to the place where my son just passed, where I lived upstairs, and now I'm coming to see my surviving son in the same area where I literally just said goodbye to my other son. You know what I mean? So it was very I don't want to say curse words, but it messed with your mind. And at that time, during COVID, one person was allowed per incubator. So me and Joe would go together, because I couldn't drive, because I was a disaster in all aspects of life. I felt like that I can't drive there, like no way. So we would go together, so we would have to find a sitter for Shay, and we would go, and Joe would wait in the waiting room, and I would go sit with Gage, and then we would switch. He was the teeniest little thing in the world. The monitors, the sounds, the smells, it changes you to your core. Every single piece is different because of that place. So his stay in the beginning was calm. Like when after Joey had passed, I remember Joey passed Christmas Eve. Christmas Day they sent me home. They said you need to be with your family and your daughter. I agree. I was only like 30 hours after a C-section, and they're like, you can go home. I was like, you know it's bad when they're like telling you gotta get out of here that soon. The first day I got to hold him was December 26th. And it was the scariest, most beautiful moment of my life. He was so little, and so many wires and tubes and the monitors, and I'm like, am I doing something wrong? I literally was like sitting here like this, like, oh my God, so scared. But in that, I almost felt like I was embodying the NICU. Like, you know what I mean? I wanted to know, what can I do to help him on this side? Like, I need to educate myself. I need to know, like, the times, like, when I should be here, and, you know what I mean? Like, I want to be as available and as involved as I can be, because at that point, I could only hold him when they took him out. I could help feed by holding the Doppler, like the dropper, and I could just talk to him. And I did as much as I could until January 1st, when we got the call. We had seen him on New Year's Eve. He was completely fine. We left. We went home. You know, I was like still in a very much distress scenario. Like, you know what I mean? Like a very distressed, like I was very uneasy. I was trying to pump, and I never had planned on pumping. So I was like, but this is what I have to do. It's the best thing for him. So that whole week is kind of like a blur, but we would go back. I was out of work, of course. We would go back and forth to the NICU. He was fine on New Year's Eve. Our phone rang at 7 a.m. and it was the NICU on New Year's Day. And I look at Joe, because they only call when something's wrong. They don't call to see how I'm doing, you know? And I answered the phone, and they said, we found blood in Gage's stool. We're transferring him to DuPont. because he might need emergency surgery. You need to get to DuPont as soon as you're able to. And I looked at Joe and I said, I can't take another thing. I can't lose that baby. Emergency surgery? What do you mean? I was there last night. I was fine. He was fine. I knew nothing about DuPont. I didn't even know DuPont had a NICU. I had no idea. I knew where DuPont was because I had been there once or twice. And we get to DuPont and I'm a disaster, to say the least. Now I'm coming off of all of this. My son is now needing emergency surgery. He's 3.5 pounds. How are you going to do emergency surgery? And they tell me that it could be neck, which don't ever look that up if you don't have to. Because God is at an evil rabbit hole for preemies. It's awful. And I'm like reading it. It was pouring rain. And I'm reading it. I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I put my phone down. And I remember me and Joe drove there and we held hands. And we sat down with the doctor. Again, one-on-one in that somber voice. There wasn't a lot of hope in her voice. And I was just like, why is this happening? Like, why? In the bigger picture, I see why it happened now, but at that moment, there was no way I could understand. Emergency surgery. What? We get to DuPont, and it's totally different than Lincoln NICU. He had his own room. We were both allowed to be in there at the same time. It was almost like a breath of fresh air that we needed. Because Lankenau was so amazing, but it also was so sad. You know what I mean? They had moved Gage to a different pod at Lankenau, so I wasn't in the same like area where my son had died, which I was so thankful for. But it was like, okay. I felt like we were out of this cloud, if that makes sense. Because at Lankenau, everything had happened there, you know? And it was like, okay, this is a whole new, nobody knows us here. Nobody knows what we just went through. So they sit us down and they're like, we have to intubate him. And imagining, my PTSD was out of this world because all I thought about was it went CPAP, intubate, and then Joey died. You're telling me you're gonna intubate my survivor? What if it doesn't go? What if it happens again? What if I lose him? We're gonna keep you up to date. We're gonna go day by day. We're gonna intubate him. We're gonna start antibiotics, and hopefully we're gonna stop feeds, and we're gonna pray, and we're gonna have hope. I said, okay. Day 1, he started to get better. Day 2, I think it was day 3. Shay was exposed to COVID at school. I couldn't go to the NICU for 10 days. One positive at DuPont, they have cameras. It was a dream because I'm like, I can't be there, but I can see him. I didn't feel like I had a call all the time and I was out of the loop. So DuPont, as much as I loved Lankenau, DuPont was such a breath of fresh air for me that it almost put me at ease. You know what I mean? Gage never ended up needing surgery, but I felt like it was God telling me, you can't be at Lankenau anymore. You gotta get out. I'm gonna scare you, but it's gonna be worth it. You know what I mean? Like I needed to get out of Lankenau because I wasn't strong enough to still walk through those doors that I was wheeled into and see both of my boys going back to just see one. You know what I mean? So in hindsight, me and Joe say it all the time. God got us out of Lankenau for a reason. And once Gage got through the neck and he never needed surgery and he got better, each day he got a little bit better and we started meeting the nurses and they started becoming like our Lankenau family. We got to know them. They all were so blown away by his story and our story as a family that they were in awe. You know what I mean? And I got to the point sometimes where it was like, let's just focus on Gage instead of like his story. I know that sounds weird, but I was like, we're at a new hospital now. Let's just get this baby better and get him home, you know? And we stayed, our total time was 54 days from start to finish. 54 times I woke up without my child at my home. Once he was stable enough, Martin Luther King Day, I went back to work. Don't ask me how I did it, because I still don't know how. But I went back to work. I still called the NICU all the time, but Gage was making progress. He was gaining weight. We were able to start getting glimpses of him without things on his face. He was on just oxygen under his nose, which was huge because he was on CPAP for so long. And every day he got a little bit better. And I kept holding my breath, waiting for setbacks. But they didn't come. And I was like, okay, I can breathe. I can start to breathe. And each day got a little bit better and a little bit better. And then they told us, they were like, most babies are here like around their due date, which was March. So it's now January and we're flowing. Like January 30th, I remember I gave him his first bottle and I was able to hold him, and the therapists were so helpful because you can't hold a preemie like a regular baby. You gotta hold him down here like a football and on your forearm, and there's so much to learn. And I'm like, how am I gonna do this? But he had his first bottle, and then he was in an open crib, and it was like one thing, like every week, it was like huge strides. And then I think it was like February 13th, they said, what do you feel about circumcising him? And I was like, oh, of course I'm doing that. I was like, but aren't we gonna wait till he like is ready to go home? And they were like, he's almost ready to go home. And I felt like I could breathe for the first time in months, because I'm trying to balance NICU life, a 2.5-year-old, a job, a husband, a house. How, oh my God, I don't have to drive here. Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh my God, I can hold my baby whenever I want. I can put him in whatever outfit I want, because taking his clothes off aren't gonna make his monitors go crazy. Or I'm not gonna have to check his temperature every time, or make him wear a hat. You know what I mean? Like, just things like that. I can be a mom. Because yeah, I was a mom, but I wasn't a full mom. I was a helper. I was so scared that he wasn't gonna like know me, because it was so long. The nurses, who I'm still great friends with today, she ended up giving us this stuffed bunny, and she gave me 2 of them. And she had one with Gage at all times, and we gave one to Shay, so she could feel a little connection, because Shay wasn't allowed to meet him. And we would look on the monitor, and Shay would always say, where's Gage's bunny? And she was like, I have mine. And she would always look for that. And they would like set him up for bedtime, and they would always make sure you could see the bunny. It was beautiful on the camera. And I felt like our family was together. You know what I mean? Like, we were able to take him home, be a unit, but also start to heal. Because I didn't heal during the NICU. I was on autopilot, which I'm sure every single mom you speak to who has a child in the NICU, they don't care if they've eaten, they don't care if they've showered, as long as they're with that baby, and that baby knows and smells and hears them. We don't care. I would have sat there at 1 o'clock in the morning if it meant that I got to stay up. And we did it, and Joe would go up on the weekends. I would go during the week. Joe would go on the weekends. We would FaceTime each other so Shay could see him. It was like survival mode. It would snow. Of course, that year it snowed a million times. And it was like, we didn't care though, because we just wanted him home. You know, and we felt like the more we were there, he would do better. And he did. And he proved everybody wrong. That a 28-weeker can come home with no oxygen, no monitors, pass the car seat test, drink his own bottle, and do everything that you don't know if they're going to. Because in that day they're born at 3 pounds, 3 ounces, 15 inches long. What is this baby's life going to look like? And I'm the proudest NICU mom in the world, and I'm sure you guys can agree, because you don't see this. People don't see life after it, you know, because you're so in it. I looked to any mom who gave me light. You were such light. I looked to anybody who would tell me I was going to survive and I was going to have a normal family one day. Like, it's not always going to be a hospital. You're not always going to be a NICU mom. Well, you are, but you know, you're not always going to be the mom sitting next to an isolette and an incubator and labeling their clothes and putting pieces of fabric in your bra so you can leave it with them so they smell you. You know, it's not normal. None of this is normal. But I'm thankful for NICUs because they saved my son's life and they saved my life. And as much as we lost, we are eternally so grateful because Joey had to go to heaven so Gage could live.
I'm Morgan Graziano.
I'm James Graziano.
We met online and it was almost 10 years ago.
Yeah. September 2015.
Yes. I did want either the emergency department or labor and delivery because I like the fast pace. But I do love babies, and after shadowing in the NICU, I fell in love. Days in the NICU can depend. Right now, everything is busy all the time. I feel like every time you turn around, there's a phone call saying we're getting one baby. And as soon as you settle that baby, we're getting another baby. They're not all preterm babies. We're getting full-term babies as well that just need some respiratory support to transition.
Prior to children, and now I was a police officer. I recently, about 1 year ago, made the rank of Sergeant, Philadelphia Police. My days are pretty crazy with the schedule because you could work double. So my mind is always on them because it's like, am I going to see them? I'm working extra, hours due to lack of manpower. So I'll go like sometimes 2 days without seeing them. Like this week, I went like 3 days without seeing them. So yeah, those are the things that like aren't so fun. So, but the lucky thing for me is I'm able to keep my days off. So I'm guaranteed at least 2 days with them.
I always wanted to have kids. He was never ready. And I kept telling him, you're never going to be ready.
Yep.
No one is ever ready to be a parent.
Nope.
And what was your pregnancy like?
Pregnancy with Josie was uneventful at first. The nausea was terrible during the summer, but then it got better. Everything seemed fine. My appointments were always boring. I always asked all the questions that a NICU nurse would ask. What does the umbilical cord look like? How many do we have? All the ventricles in the heart? How's the brain? And they would look at you and they would know who you are. But everything was pretty uneventful until I was admitted to the hospital. I was 27 weeks, so everything was fine up until 27 weeks. So I didn't know there was any issues. It was a typical work weekend. I left work Sunday night. I knew I had my glucose intolerance test on a Monday morning, and I was just concerned that I would not be able to eat my cookies and ice cream anymore. Every night, every single night, cookies and ice cream. I was deathly afraid of having gestational diabetes. I walked into my appointment, no symptoms. They took my blood pressure and it was 170s over 100s, 110s. And that's when they told me that they were admitting me to the hospital. The nurse side of me knew it was serious, knew I wasn't leaving the hospital. So I think I called you to pack me a bag. I called my mom that I was being admitted, not that she could come because it was in the height of COVID. So I was alone. I think that was my biggest fear. That was the biggest thing during this pregnancy. I was alone the whole time. He was never allowed at any appointments. He was never allowed at any ultrasounds due to COVID. So it was a lonely pregnancy. And then when I was admitted to the hospital, it was just the floor, kind of. It was like the floor dropped out. Because my biggest fear was the whole pregnancy was having COVID and having to deliver by myself. That was my one concern. But not to be admitted and be alone. So that was really hard. I knew I shouldn't go home. I knew I couldn't go home because I knew I had preeclampsia. I knew it was serious. Luckily, I had nurses. The nurses that were admitting me, I was friends with because I worked with them. So that was nice. And they could tell that I knew that it was a problem, but I wanted to go home.
Like she said, like, yeah, I'm gonna deliver, but it's just like, it doesn't really like hit you, and it feels like out of body experience because it's like you don't think of stuff like that happening to you, or your wife, and the other difficult part is, I guess, for maybe the both of us too, is her and I have these jobs where you have knowledge and control within this like sphere, and you're taken out of that sphere where you don't have any of those things. So that was one of the frightening things for me, at least.
When I was first admitted, I was in the hospital for a week. I convinced them every day I cried, and then I finally convinced them to let me leave.
Yeah.
And then I could monitor myself at home. And one of the doctors let me leave, but we knew I would be delivering early. I went home. I think I spent the next week on the couch. It didn't really help, and the deal was that I had to come in every single day, every other day, for a non-stress test and an ultrasound to make sure everything was fine. So every day we packed the bag, not sure if, and I would have to go in by myself because it was COVID, and he would wait for the phone call either to pick me up or if I was delivering, and we were fine. And then we were supposed to have Christmas dinner at my parents' house, but my mom moved it to our house. So Christmas Eve in the evening, my mom brought like all the china to the house, everything, set everything up. So everything was ready for Christmas Day because I had my non-stress test on Christmas morning. So we went to the hospital. I was dressed, ready to come home, hair, makeup done, everything to feel normal. And my blood pressure was high. Unfortunately, the nurse I had wasn't even going to let him come in to give me my bag. They were just going to drop it at the desk and have someone bring it up. But I think they finally let you come up to see me before he had to leave. So he went to my parents. We had one nurse that let him come back in after everyone had left so I could have Christmas dinner. And I had started with chest pain, but I was just saying it was indigestion, and I wasn't really saying much about it. And then finally, the next morning, it became worse. It was just awful chest pain. They gave me every oral medication, IV medication for indigestion. I was texting some of the other labor and delivery nurses I knew, see if there was anything else that could be done. And then COVID was one of those weird times where no one really wanted to spend time in your room because the unknown, even though you were negative, it's kind of, in, out, get whatever you have to done. I think around 6:30, 7 p.m., I had decided I would take a shower, see if that would help, and I don't know, maybe something would get better. And the nurse that I had the night before, she was back, and I got into bed and I couldn't lay down, and I was texting him, texting my sister. She told me to keep pushing to say that something was wrong, but I just didn't really want to bother anyone. So that was when she told me to call Jimmy to come in because she knew something wasn't right. And then finally, like, my blood work came back, and with preeclampsia, once it's worsening, they monitor your blood pressure, but they also monitor your labs. And at that point, my liver function had doubled, which means it's worsening and can go into HELLP syndrome, which is even worse. So at that point, they told me I was going to deliver. And luckily my OB was in that night, so she was going to be the one delivering. And we just had to wait for her. We had to wait for maternal fetal medicine to come in, and then I delivered. And at that point, I think I just felt relief because I knew that was the only way that I would get better. That's preeclampsia. That's the only way you save the mom is by delivering the baby and the placenta. So I knew, and at that point I was in so much pain that I wanted it to stop. So she delivered shortly after midnight. It took a bit to finally connect with her. I felt like I was going through the motions because I knew what was happening. And I felt like I was talking him through what was going on. And when he sat down, I feel like I was explaining to him what was going to happen. I was just holding my breath, waiting for the cry, waiting to hear what was going on. And I was just going through my head every single thing, resuscitating the baby, what we're looking for. So I'm listening to the nurses, I'm listening to the doctors to hear just things that I know that we talk before we really say anything. And it took a few days, and then one of my coworkers finally, and I think when we first went up to the unit, and I was able to do care on her and everything, I was going through the motions like she was my patient. Like she wasn't even mine. And then I think it took a few days, and finally one of the nurses realized, and she told me at that point, she said, you need to be a mom. You're not a nurse. So that helped me finally connect with her. We're changing things in the NICU, so I didn't even get to hold her for over almost 2 days.
Yeah. And after
So-
she delivered, her and I and Josie were all in the same room. And I just remember, she said, she was like, you better enjoy this now because this is the last time we're all going to be together until she leaves.
Yes, due to COVID.
Yeah.
And because at that point, mom and dads were not allowed to visit together. It was one at a time, and once you left the hospital, you were not allowed back in that day.
Yeah.
So
that was the last time.
yeah,
The day she was born was the first and last time we were all in the same room together until she left.
so 53 days
Yeah.
until we were all back together.
Yeah.
All of the things that was like a curse for her, knowing so much, was like my silver lining. So I thought that was just crazy how that was my safety net. Her knowing all this information and having experience in this field. But for her, it was like she would have been better off like not knowing.
First, it was built up because we
Yeah.
were supposed to leave one day, and then she had what we call an event. Like she dropped her heart rate while she was sleeping, dropped her pulse ox. So then that was delayed for about 5 days. So it was another 5 days, and I knew she was still having I think she was still having some events while eating, but other than that, she was fine, and I knew I would be feeding her, and he was fine feeding her, but just knowing I was going to be home, I really pushed to leave on a day because a snowstorm was coming.
We'd like be holding our breaths. And they would like look to see if she would have an event. Because the event would like reset everything. So you'd be watching the monitor and
I remember like holding my breath, being like,
Yeah.
hoping that like she's not gonna have an event. The doctors would be like, okay, you guys can go home now, and like, you know, so.
Yeah. So it was like once we found out we were leaving, it was like get out of there as fast as
Yeah,
possible.
yeah, quick before something happens. Before they
get
change
her
their
off
mind.
the
Yeah.
monitor.
Obviously, do you feel like you have trauma from the experience? And if you do, how do you cope with that?
Definitely have trauma. Therapy, medication. Doesn't help that I walk into that unit every time I go to work. I think I did okay for a bit. I was okay for a while. Going into the OR, that was tough the first time that I was in. But work, I think I did pretty well. Until I had a baby in her bed spot.
Yeah.
And Nadia was in her bed spot. Megan's Nadia. But I don't know, it was different. It was because it was on Mother's Day. I had a baby very sick. He was born a few days before Mother's Day. And it was just, I was discovering thing after thing, and it was just, that was tough.
Yeah.
That was really hard. Working on Mother's Day, knowing you're working on Mother's Day, and then coming into that, and it's in her bed spot. And though Josie, thankfully had a relatively normal and boring NICU stay, like no big setbacks. It was still tough being right there. I think that really got to me. We got closer.
We definitely got closer because it was a supporting thing.
Yes.
It was, you know.
Definitely got closer. And I feel like it's like almost like a cliche now, but COVID really, that really did a number on us, and just
It was almost
the fact
like,
of like being taken
yeah.
apart from each other.
It was almost like I tell people, I'm like, yeah, my wife was like incarcerated at Lankenau.
Just taking it one day at a time.
Yeah. And that, I feel like that's a cliche to say, but it's the truth. Like, that's what got me through it. Was I was just like, I remember just saying like God, just give me one more day. God, just give us one more day. Like, just like, so that got me through. Yeah.
And even just, I think just being a NICU nurse, I knew not to ask when we were leaving, just because I knew you just don't ask.
Yeah.
Because the answer you're gonna get is, well, when were you due? It's probably closer to your due date. Some babies go after. We can't, every baby's different. So I never asked. There was never a question. And I was fielding those questions from my family nonstop. When is she coming home? When are you going to feed her? When can you do this? When can you do that? I guess if I put myself in that position, it's without any medical knowledge, it's hard not to ask. But I think the best thing to do is not ask when they're going to come home. Is just take it day by day.
Yeah.
But also don't think that once you come home, it's all better.
Yeah.
Because we're still in therapy for her, physical therapy, occupational therapy. It's just, it goes beyond the NICU.
You tackle like these small battles.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it's hard to explain, but that's the only way I can describe it. Is it's like now you're tackling little small battles.
Mm-hmm.
So and that in that is like kind of like, day by day. Like you have good days, you have bad days, but the progress, when you see progress being made, it's very noticeable. So that's my take on that. Is when she started talking.
The first time she said yes and she signed it, we were like,
yeah,
she's never done this before.
Yeah.
So I don't know, just take the small victories.
Yeah.
Take the small victories.
Yeah, the small victories turn into big ones.
Yeah. So I mean, in general, sometimes as nurses, we just have to slow down. Sometimes we forget I think even as a police officer, we forget. We are in this role. We're very much in the nurse role, and I have to come in and do this job. And sometimes the parents' feelings can take a back seat. And it's something that I always catch myself on, like if the baby's like heart rate drops, or if they like pull out their feeding tube, we sit there and we go, oh, that's normal, it's fine. That's huge for a parent. I know it's normal. I had to tell him that taking her temperature under her armpit, it was like the world's ending for them. It's like you're torturing the babies, and they really truly think that they're hurting their baby. So just to put ourselves, and I still catch myself from time to time because I'm just trying to get through the day and get through work, is just taking the time to realize, like, this isn't normal for the parent. They don't know that this is normal.
Yeah.
So just paying attention to how they're feeling, and and sympathize and be empathetic to how they're feeling.
There's a lot of mothers that are there, and I think that's a good thing, where it's like, you know, it's more relatable, where it's like, you know, if this was my child. And there are, case in point, my wife, there is it's a low percentage, but there are, you know, moms there that went through what she went through and what other parents are going through. So, you know, and it's crazy, because it's like, you, from a experience standpoint of like a staffing member, it's almost like a through my eyes, it's almost like a badge of like honor, like it's a high, like you should wear that with pride, like for the nurses out there that have gone through like what she's gone through. But at the same time, it's also like a burden. It's like, also, I guess it's kind of like from a law enforcement standpoint, it's like you survived like a shooting, being somebody trying to take your life, and you know, other officers look at that and like they have like high respect, high regard to that officer. But that officer, like, they could be proud of themselves, but it's also like it's a heavy weight to carry too.
It's traumatic.
Yeah.
It's trauma.
It's trauma. So yeah, I mean, they're not alone. There is a percentage of NICU nurses that have gone through that. So I just hope that, you know, those nurses are as transparent as she is to those patients.
I think moms need more mental health support. Just there are other nonprofits out there that do give support to moms. They come in and some will sit and talk, but I think it's also nice to have a place to go, and even little like care. If we can give them something like a little spa type care package, or you know, just to get their hair done, just to get out of the NICU, because you don't want to leave, but there are days where you just need to, and just to have someone else to talk to that has been there, it would be huge. Because I even tell moms now that are there all day, day in and day out, there are times where I've told them, you know, you're going to hear other nurses tell you, you need to go out, you need to do something for yourself. And I said, you can get mad at them. I said, you cannot get mad at me, because I've been there. I think that was also kind of the blessing of COVID, where I couldn't be there all the time. So my mom would drive down, put me in the car, take me to Longwood Gardens, and shove me in a wheelchair and wheel me around Longwood Gardens, just to get out and to drive in the opposite direction of the hospital, just because that was my life. So I think that's something that we can give.